Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 10, The Baby Shower. Hello everyone. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing okay. I'm recording a bit later than I usually do in the week, but I've had to be out of the house, had to take my kids out of the house because our basement project is still happening and they are in the lacquering stage. Lacquer. They're lacquering all the built-ins we're getting put in. So those fumes are no joke. So we had to be out of the house if we, wanted to breathe. And I decided breathing's important. So kids, let's go to the trampoline park. Let's go to lunch and let's just be out of this house so we're not feeling the fumes in our heads like we did this morning. They started very early in the morning and we were all lightheaded by 8:30 in the morning. So anyway, it's a little later than I like to record, but it was in the interest of saving some brain cells for me. And I need brain cells for a lot of things, but especially for Hot and Heavy. So I'm doing this for all of you. All right, let's get into the episode. The synopsis from my coffee table book is as follows. Elaine throws a baby shower in Jerry's apartment. George plots revenge on the guest of honor, an ex-girlfriend who once threw chocolate syrup on him while doing her performance art. Kramer talks Jerry into getting illegal cable, but the installers end up crashing the baby shower. Jerry is confronted by a woman he scorned. This episode is written by Larry Charles. Is it fair to call Leslie George's ex-girlfriend? I think they just went on one date. I think that's not an accurate way to describe that, but whatever. Okay, so we start the episode out in Monk's. The first scene is with Jerry, Elaine, and George. They're all having a meal. And right away, they start talking about Leslie being pregnant. And George talks about how that was the worst date he ever had. Worst ever. And Elaine's just like, well, sorry for trying to set you up with a beautiful, intelligent woman. And this is a little moment that's always captured in those clip shows. You don't think I could attract that? A nice, beautiful woman? Thin ice, George. Very thin ice. So George goes on to describe why he hates Leslie so much. She took him on their date to see one of her performances. She was cooking dinner for God. She's yelling and screaming and ends up throwing chocolate sauce all over George. And Elaine says it was an accident. Oh, no, it wasn't, George says. She was aiming for me. But when George goes backstage, he was like a groveling worm. He didn't even act mad that he was covered in chocolate sauce and flies were landing on him. And then, to top it off, she left with someone else. What a jerk. And then Elaine mentions that Leslie asked her to throw her a baby shower. And Jerry's reaction's like, what? Asked you? You're not going to do this. Because how obnoxious is that? And she says, anyone else, never. But I have a problem saying no to Leslie. I feel like I need her approval. They also make reference to the Kennedys. Apparently, Leslie is married to a Kennedy by marriage. And so there's all these references to JFK quotes and whatnot. And Elaine just gets so annoyed. Why does everyone make such a big deal about the Kennedys? They're so boring. Who cares? Then Elaine drops the bomb. She wants to throw the shower at Jerry's apartment. Her roommate has Lyme disease and Epstein-Barr. Epstein-Barr with a twist of Lyme disease. A little cheesy, but I thought it was cute. Jerry reluctantly says fine, after asking a few questions about how maybe, violent these types of things get. So the purpose of this scene is just our setup scene. It's really George focused. We see his rage towards Leslie, who is Elaine's college friend. And Elaine needs to throw the shower at Jerry's place because more drama with Tina, the roommate. My overall take, it's a solid scene. Lots of information offered. I love George when he's on one of his rants. It just keeps coming back. Julia Louis-Dreyfus plays this scene in a very understated way. I mean, each line of hers is delivered very matter of fact, and I like that. And to me, the performance shows her struggle with not wanting to disappoint Leslie, a friend who she said, she needs her approval. I can so relate to this. I mean, it's not fun to admit, but up until very recently, I had a few of these people in my life. I, for so long, had allowed them to sort of define my self-worth based on how they saw me. And much like we'll see with Leslie, the people in my life, not the nicest or warmest people, but nevertheless, for many reasons, they just held this power over me. But I am happy to report that I have awoken from the delusion that those people who have clearly, that was another thing, they have shown me over and over again that they have no genuine interest in me, showed me that on a regular basis, that I released them from having that power over me, which is really fucking liberating, I have to say. I highly recommend it. If any of you out there are struggling with needing validation from people who don't really have any genuine interest in your well-being, then fuck them. Just leave them behind. They're not worth it. And I think once you kind of awaken like I did from the haze of needing the approval, you see that those people really don't deserve to be put on whatever pedestal that you'd been putting them on. So, wait, what? I'm sorry. Oh, this isn't my therapy podcast. This is my Elaine Bennis. Sorry, guys. Sorry for that tangent. Anyway, moving on. The scene was very entertaining, just 3 people sitting and eating, yet the writing is so strong that you're interested the entire time. It's a lot of funny moments mixed in with the exposition necessary for the setup. And also, I have to say it, Jason Alexander is a master of the rant. The next few scenes don't include Elaine, so I'm just going to go over them really quick. We're in Jerry's apartment next. The cable sucks. Kramer is trying to get Jerry to hook up illegal cable. This is the Kramer storyline. We don't get it in the setup scene, but we get it in the next scene. Moving on, we have the very odd dream sequence where Jerry gets caught with the illegal cable and then gets shot at the end and is getting cradled by Kramer. I'm just going to move on because I don't really find it interesting or entertaining. And then next, Jerry's on the airplane. He's flying to the gig on Saturday, which was the whole reason that he agreed also to Elaine throwing that baby shower, because he was going to be out of town to Buffalo, I believe. But the plane was flying right into a blizzard, so they had to make an emergency landing. Next, we're in George's car. Jerry appreciates the pickup, and George says, no, it's nothing. Then Jerry realizes, no, we can't go back to my place. Elaine's having a baby shower. We'll just have to go back to your place. George doesn't want to. George says, we should at least drop off your bag. And then Jerry sees George is wearing that red shirt. Red shirt! He wants to confront Leslie. And Jerry said, what are you going to do? You're going to badger a pregnant woman at her baby shower? And George wants to tell her it's payback time. He doesn't care it's her baby shower. Of course he doesn't. And then finally, we're at the baby shower. Leslie is bragging about an apartment. She makes a reference, and I could have looked into it, but I didn't really want to. But suffice it to say, it was definitely something that she was bragging about, the apartment, because of whoever lived in it before. Now, Leslie is played by Christine Dunford. She will also appear in a later episode as the suit saleswoman who helps George. She looks very different. She's blonde and has an accent. And also in that episode, does not get along with Elaine. Elaine is asking about the mannequin that looks exactly like her. And Christine Dunford plays the saleswoman who could not disagree more that it looks like Elaine. But we'll get into that when we get to that episode. But anyway, she does reappear in a later episode of Seinfeld as a different character. So a little more background on Christine Dunford. She has something in common with Dr. Van Nostrand. She's Juilliard trained. But not in dermatology, in theater, I think, like most people who went to Juilliard. And she's really done it all: theater, television, movies, voiceover work. And I think she is perfectly cast as Leslie. She's the Elaine foe before we meet Sue Ellen Mischke. But you see the first iteration of that type of character that's Elaine's, I guess, Lex Luthor, as Jerry puts it about Sue Ellen. Very tall, beautiful, and has status, which are all the things that make Elaine feel small. So yeah, this casting was great. She was really good as Leslie. Elaine is in hostess mode, and she's trying to you could just tell the desperation right away when she's talking to Leslie, and she freaks out because Todd's in Hyannisport. I love that reaction. Leslie mentions she's having a planned C-section because labor might make her psychotic. And Leslie insults Elaine. Elaine, who catered this? Sears? Okay, this is such a curious choice to me, this dialogue. And it's not that I don't like it. I like that it's so odd to use Sears as the reference. And it's all in the spirit of insulting Elaine's party planning skills. But to choose Sears, I don't know. Sears doesn't sell food or provide anything resembling catering services. So yes, okay, I get it. That's why it's so random and funny, and it's the more insulting choice. But I actually think it's funny because at that time that the joke was made, Sears had over like 900 locations and employed 250,000 people. This is from the Notes About Nothing. I don't have these random facts about Sears in my head. But if she said it today, it would be funnier because Sears is essentially out of business. And I don't know, it just kind of works better today on that level because it's pretty much closed. What's that? Oh, this isn't a podcast about defunct department stores. Right. Okay. All right. Moving on. Kramer enters with the cable guys. Elaine says they can't do this now, but Kramer says, well, they have to. She pleads with Kramer, but he will not budge. And she says, fine, but just do it fast. Elaine is apologizing to everyone. She's so mortified. Kramer, this moment really cracked me up when Kramer says, no, they'll be done. And then you and the gals can watch something on Lifetime. And then there's a moment where Kramer sort of lifts up his shirt as he's stretching and everyone's grossed out. And I just want to mention how much I love Michael Richards' performance in this scene. And the lifting of the shirt at the end, I mean, I'm sure that was just his own acting choice. And it's so great because it just really digs in what a nuisance he is at this party. And just, poor Elaine, poor Elaine. The purpose of the scene, we see the baby shower in progress, and now the infamous Leslie, we've heard a lot about her. Elaine is trying so hard. The shower isn't going great, and then Kramer walks in with the brash cable guys and just won't leave. It's just, oof. My overall take, this is a new side to Elaine. Desperate Elaine. We've seen flirty Elaine. We've seen annoyed Elaine. We've seen downright mad Elaine. But this is the first time we see this side of Elaine that is very believable and stays true to the character. I mean, the seed was planted that she feels this need to get Leslie's approval. So going into this scene, the audience knows why Elaine is acting so overly excited about Hyannisport and asks about Sergeant Shriver. She's trying to impress Leslie, trying to relate to her, and it all gets shot down in just one line with who catered this, Sears. I mean, my Lord, just deflates Elaine right away. And for my writer nerds out there, this is an example of fantastic character development in such a short amount of time. The first time we see Leslie in the episode, we know some very key things about her, and Christine Dunford had the job to bring that to life. And bravo to Larry Charles for doing something that's pretty tricky. I mean, to me, fleshed out characters is a main focus when, I'm writing and performing. So I love seeing examples where we haven't had some huge amount of time dedicated to development of the character, but instead we've had a few lines of dialogue that tell the audience what this person is all about, sort of their essence, what makes them tick. Recently, I got an audition for a commercial, and in the description of the character, who, mind you, only had 2 lines in a 30-second spot, was a full paragraph. And it was so helpful, and I appreciated whoever wrote that. I really appreciated it because no matter how small the screen time may be, it's super helpful to an actor to really understand at a deeper level than I think most would think what that person's about. In fact, when I coach improv, I always give my students a mini workshop on character development because more than anything, that's what the audience will respond to. And if they can feel who this person is, they'll be more engaged. And especially in improv, because you're creating a character totally on the spot. And so that's really challenging. I'm sorry. Oh, no, this isn't a podcast about the importance of character development. That's my fault. So the next scene, we're still in George's car. They must be just sitting outside of Jerry's apartment before going in. And George recites what he's going to say to Leslie. It's this big monologue. It's insulting. It's just unloading everything he's ever wanted to say. And Jerry just says, "You'll never say that to her face. Watch me." The next scene, we're back at the baby shower. The cable guy one of them's just eating the food. Elaine's like, come on, she's getting upset. And then the cable guys start fighting. Kramer has to break it up. In the middle of that, Jerry enters with George. And she's just like, what is this? He says, I had to come back. The flight was canceled because of the blizzard. And Elaine looks over at George, and right away she knows. She knows. I love this sort of telepathic moment, and it just speaks to their great relationship in the show. I do love that relationship. And she just walks over and says, George, don't even think about it. Don't even dream about it. And he's just kind of like, well, I'm playing innocent. George removes his shirt, reveals the who knows how long Bosco stain on his shirt, and saunters over to Leslie. She doesn't recognize him at all, vaguely remembers him after he reminds her that they went out. And yeah, George crumbles. He completely doesn't say anything he rehearsed and tells her that her show was good. It was really good. And then on the other side of the party, Mary Contardi, she approaches Jerry, confronts him because he never called her after they went out. It's, I guess it's more than a confrontation. She's screaming at him. Mary is played by Margaret Reed. She's done a ton of movies, television, theater. I always thought this moment was over the top, like a lot over the top. But I know it was supposed to be the female version of what George wanted to do to Leslie, but chickened out. A lot of the dialogue was even the same of what George had expressed in the car prior to the party. So I understand the parallel there. But again, to me, it was way too over the top. Margaret Reed, nothing against her. She delivers it perfectly. I'm sure that's exactly what they wanted out of her. But it's just not my favorite moment. And it's not due to her performance in the least, just overdone for me. After she unloads on Jerry, she goes into the bedroom, exits the apartment, but as she exits, she pushes Leslie's cake into George's shirt. Or rather, she pushes Leslie, which causes Leslie to push her cake into George's shirt. I know this was for comedic effect, but it makes no sense at all that Leslie would blame George for that. But again, she's a jerk, and especially a jerk to George. And then Leslie's leaving, and Elaine is so defeated. She just apologizes. Leslie just, again, can't let anything go and says, Elaine, I was watching you tonight and it occurred to me, you're just like you were in college. And just walks out after that. No follow-up, which of course leads Elaine to say, what was I like in college? And this was a great button, I thought. George is taking all the gifts for her. Of course, there's just handfuls. He's trying to push this little plastic car out. It was a great moment. The purpose of this scene is the convergence or that dovetailing of all the plots, everything that was discussed in that setup scene, and I guess in the second scene with the cable, all comes together in Jerry's apartment. My overall take, this is once again another example of how the selfishness of the men on this show cause Elaine a lot of distress. I mean, Jerry gave the okay for the cable guys to come in during the party. Kramer refuses to take the disgusting cable guys away. And George finagles his way into a party in order to confront Leslie, which would, of course, ruin the party if he actually did follow through with it. And, he realizes this is Elaine's friend and someone that she wants the approval of, but he didn't care. And look, I realize being selfish is eventually going to be what we love about these characters. But at this point, it feels very, I guess, like one-sided against Elaine. They have zero regard for her feelings at all here. And I feel Elaine's stress here. I mean, everything just keeps getting worse. I like how you can see Julia Louis-Dreyfus going around the room and apologizing to all the ladies. During all of that, she's mortified, but I did love also that she enjoyed Jerry getting screamed at. Her big smile after that is just priceless. So that moment where Leslie's leaving and says that, another insulting thing to Elaine about her being the same as she was in college, JLD is so good at playing that nervous and apologetic Elaine. Her voice is almost shaking, and then Leslie lays that line on her about being exactly like she was in college and just lets it hang there. Such an asshole. And that ending was great. Like I said, George helping with all the gifts because he completely wussed out. Did you call me a wuss? Yeah, George, I did. And then our final scene, we're in Jerry's apartment. The TV is broken because he canceled the cable installation, and those guys weren't too happy about it. Jerry, George, and Elaine, they're just staring at the broken TV, not really watching it. They're all kind of consumed with their own thoughts. And George's thought is that he just wants all women. And the irony of that, no matter how badly they treat him, he wants them all. Elaine just says, why can't I meet a Kennedy? I saw John Jr. when I was on the bus. I hit the ding. It didn't stop. Oh, but Elaine, you shall have your moment with John F. Kennedy Jr. That's coming up in a later episode. Kramer comes in and says, hey, Dr. Zhivago's on. I'll make popcorn. He's inviting them over. Purpose of this scene, we see the aftermath of all the destruction of the day. The baby shower, George's failed attempt to confront Leslie, the angry Russian cable installers, and, well, Jerry's recovering from being yelled at by Mary. Even though Kramer caused a lot of this, he just seems to have come off totally unscathed, which is very Kramer. My overall take on this scene, I liked it because at the end they're all, they've all had this awful day, yet they would all rather be together staring at a busted ass TV than apart. And there's something really sweet about that to me, like this friendship intimacy. All right, so let's take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Madeline, this is such a beautiful spread. You've outdone yourself.
Oh, well, I just wanted this to be special for you.
Hey, Cindy, look at these balloons. Huh? Oh, no. I misjudged my fetal girth. Pregnancy can be one of the most beautiful experiences in a woman's life. But there are downsides. Morning sickness, swollen ankles, insomnia. There is another common, yet rarely discussed struggle to pregnancy: bump destruction. For most women, a baby bump is considered fully formed by month 7. So that means for about 2 months, that bump has the capability to do some very moderate damage. Did you know in the United States, every 15 seconds, a beverage is knocked clear off a table by a baby bump? 1 out of every 5 older siblings have gotten slapped in the face by their mother's belly, often resulting in minutes of crying. Baby bump collisions have also been known to slam doors really hard, which can cause startling. Now there's a way to prevent these medium annoyances and enjoy those last couple of months of carrying life. The bump thumper. Using the same blind spot monitoring technology from cars, the bump thumper senses when objects are near your bump and lightly vibrates to let you know, slow down, mama. Allow a wide berth to your girth. The bump thumper sensors stick comfortably to the skin, and the vibration can only be felt by the mother-to-be. No one will be the wiser when you skillfully maneuver your way through an overstocked antique store without so much as grazing a colonial teacup. They will only be thinking, wow, she's going to be a great mother. The bump thumper isn't only for expectant moms. It can also be used on beer guts, front butts, and giant asses. Any bulbous part of your body can benefit from the guiding vibrations of the bump thumper. Pick up the bump thumper at any Love's Discount Health and Beauty Aids or a Sears location that hasn't shut its doors for good. The bump thumper, because we don't want your bump to be a verb. And we're back. Now, there are a few extras for this episode on the DVDs. There was an inside look. The only real thing I wanted to mention from the inside look, Larry Charles does mention that this was one of those early attempts to weave all the storylines together. So the baby shower and the cable, they all sort of came together at Jerry's apartment at the end. And that was something that really excited Larry David. So this was one of the first attempts to do that. In all of the notes about nothing, I really enjoyed this little nugget. They said that this was a cut line from the baby shower scene. One of the guests at the baby shower says, an easy way to turn off a guy is to say it's that time of the month. Elaine says, men will flock to an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, buckets of blood splattered everywhere, but show them a little stain and they head for the hills. So there's no mention as to why this was cut, but I guess I'm, sure it was a network thing. They didn't want period humor on the show. Now, look, I am someone who's very passionate about normalizing open discussion about the female reproductive system. We've made it shameful for too long or embarrassing. So I would have loved for this to be included because it was certainly true of that time. I do think the tide is turning a little bit, and I'm definitely doing my part by raising my son to be very aware of what goes on with girls and periods and puberty. And I love this. I've talked with friends who send their sons, their middle school aged and older sons, to school with period supplies in their backpack so they can be an ally and support girls in their school that maybe need them. I mean, I love that. I'm definitely doing that with my son. This isn't an advocacy podcast for open period talk. Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. Get back on track. The commentary for this episode was done by Larry Charles. So just a few things that he mentioned. The idea about Leslie scheduling her C-section and the line about, my doctor says I could go psychotic if I go through the childbirth. That idea came from Larry Charles's friend who had requested to be tranquilized during the birth so that she could sleep through the whole thing. Too bad she wasn't a mother in like the 50s and 60s, a whole period of time where they did knock out women during childbirth. And just woke them up when their baby was nice and clean and ready for them to just hold on to. I, for one, I'm glad I went through the process and felt it all. I can say that now. I'm like over 8 years removed from the last time. So anyway, moving on. This isn't a podcast about should we give birth and be awake? Never mind. Another thing Larry Charles mentions, the performance artist idea. Apparently at the time, there was a notorious performance artist in New York named Karen Finley who used food in her act and kind of the same things that were described with Leslie's act. So Larry Charles just thought that was ripe for satire, that subject. This was the first mention of interest in the Kennedys and gave Elaine some shading to use later on in the Virgin episode that I was talking about. He also mentioned this, and again, this is my writer nerd being fascinated by these types of little tidbits of information. He said there was a quick turnaround with writing episodes on Seinfeld. The first draft was due within a couple days after they decided what the episode was going to be about. You had a couple days to write it. And then also I like that he said that the goal of the A scene, or the setup scene, I guess I've been calling it, but he called it the A scene. The goal of the A scene was to introduce everything that would subsequently continue what was established. So kind of like what we've talked about in earlier episodes. They're setting up all the little elements of the episode to, address through every scene. And well, now they're looking to converge it all by the end. He does talk about how great Christine Dunford was. She had a great read, just so dry. We loved her right away. And Larry Charles actually does mention that this is a great episode for Elaine because you see that under the surface, she's teeming with neuroses. We see how she crumbles around Leslie. So yeah, like I'd mentioned earlier, this is the first time we see this desperate, wanting approval Elaine, this side of her, and I really, really love that part of her. All right, let's move on to Contributor Corner. We have some thoughts from Beth. Beth sent in thoughts a few weeks ago, and she sent some more in this week. So happy to have some of Beth's thoughts. Okay, so she says, I love how genuine JLD seems to laugh at Jerry's comment about how George thought he still had a shot with Leslie at the end of the not-so-good date. I also love when she asks Jerry if she can host Leslie's shower at his place because her roommate has Lyme disease. And then when he asks, I thought she had Epstein-Barr syndrome, her answer of, she has that in addition to Epstein-Barr. It's like Epstein-Barr with a twist of Lyme disease. Brilliant. I like that too, Beth. It's a little, like I said earlier, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's cute. And when Julia Louis-Dreyfus delivers it with her little physical, like kind of twist of her hand, it just makes it all the better for me. Beth goes on to say, that said, I really didn't like this Leslie character, which is probably a testament to the actress's talent. She was really a mean girl to Lainey with comments like, who catered this, Sears? Yeah, I mean, I think that really does add some color to Elaine needing her approval, as sick as it is. Like I was saying about my own personal thing, I needed the approval of mostly women that weren't very nice to me. And it's just some sick twisted way to think about it. I don't know. It does not make sense, and I agree with you. Oh, and Beth's next point, why did Elaine grovel for this horrible person? Despite Elaine's protestations in the beginning of the episode about not getting the mystique of the Kennedys, she certainly seemed full of questions to Leslie about the Kennedys. Does she put up with this awful woman because she's actually obsessed with the Kennedys and Leslie has a slight connection to the Kennedys? Or does Leslie truly have some power over Elaine? Elaine did say she can't say no to her and that for some reason she seems to want her approval. Similarly, George seemed to grovel at her feet too, despite his claim all episode long that he was going to tell her what he really thought of her. Overall, a funny episode. Yeah, again, just kind of continuing what I was saying, it's just this, it does not make sense. It's not logical, but there are people who, for whatever reason, can command this reaction from others. I just thought of this girl in college who was sort of like this. She was notorious for kind of treating people like shit, but they couldn't say no to anything she wanted. Now, I should mention, she was like otherworldly gorgeous. Like when I finally met her, I'd heard a lot about this person. And when I finally met her one time, we all met up at a bar. She was like how you'd feel if you saw Winona Ryder in person. Like she was just so effortlessly gorgeous. But anyway, she did have this power over men and women. And one of our good friends was dating her, but she would treat him like crap. Like it was just this crazy power she held, and she wasn't particularly nice or warm or pleasant. You know, there wasn't some other kind of like, oh, she's so smart, or to me, I couldn't see any reason why people would just grovel at her feet. But much like Leslie, back to the episode, much like Leslie, I just think there are these people who, for whatever reason, hold this power, and they know that they do, and they use it to their advantage. I think that's interesting, though, Beth, that you mentioned, is this Elaine's way to get to the Kennedys, is because she is secretly obsessed with them? I actually didn't see it that way. I do think she was letting on that she wasn't interested in the Kennedys in the beginning, but that she was. But I think her motivation was just to try and impress Leslie and just, oh, he's in Hyannisport. I just think it was all about her needing Leslie's approval, even though Leslie is a complete asshole. Thank you so much, Beth. It was so great to hear from you again. Now, moving on to our trusty Greg. He sent in some thoughts as well. Greg says, the flow of this episode was really unusual in my opinion. The first scene was really long, setting up both George's and Elaine's relationship with the woman Elaine is throwing a shower for, who is a Kennedy for some reason. Then there's that ridiculous scene of Jerry's dream about getting shot because Kramer talks him into getting an illegal cable hookup. Then there's the plane scene. Then there's a car ride with George where we find out he's plotting revenge. Then it's combining the cable plot with the baby shower into the same scene. All of this with the Jerry stand-up bits interspersed. There's not enough that is funny in this episode. It's like they took a bunch of leftover ideas and combined them all in one. Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, Greg, because during the commentary, Larry Charles, he kind of did call that out. I give him credit because this is an episode he wrote, but especially the plane thing, he goes, there's zero follow-up to this whole plane being, going through an emergency landing. Yeah, it was interesting. And yeah, I agree. There it's just very hodgepodge. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that, my take on what you talk about here in a little bit. But yes, I'm completely on the same page. There isn't a lot of funny in this episode. I think it's well written, but it's not like, haha, oh my God, such great moments. And again, I'll get into that in a little bit, but agreed. Next, Greg says, I do like how Elaine originally said, why is everyone obsessed with the Kennedys? When later at the party, she seemed to be more interested in talking about the Kennedys than anyone. Yeah, I think she just wanted to not be obsessed with the Kennedys because everyone is, but you know what? Secretly, she is too. It's a interesting little facet to her personality or her character. Greg goes on to say, Elaine's female friends, in most cases, are women we only see once and who she clearly doesn't like, and we don't either. She's one of the guys, and her dynamic with other women is always funny to watch because she either openly hates them or is trying to get them to like her when they are unlikable themselves. Yes, very true. I'm wondering if, by default, Elaine's character became this way because, as I've discussed, the writer's room at this point, at least early on, it was all men. So they were writing her as a guy. So I think maybe just naturally she becomes a guy's woman, as Kramer calls her later when she says, I don't have any female friends left. And look, I can relate to this a little bit because I felt like a guy's girl for a while because I just wasn't great at nurturing my female friendships. Nurturing a female friendship is a whole different ballgame than nurturing a male friendship. So even though I was like, oh, I think I'm just a guy's woman or whatever, I really just deep down felt guilty because I'm like, oh man, I really do want strong female friendships, but it's my own damn fault for not taking care of those friendships the way I should have. So I made that shift a long time ago because I saw the value of just these really strong female bonds. And so I was like, you know what? Stop being so fucking lazy and, nurture these friendships because you miss them every time they fade away because you haven't taken care of them. So, but yeah, I think, wait, what? This isn't a podcast about my female friendships? Okay. But you're right. She's always presented as openly hating or needing approval because with Sue Ellen Mischke, who she has very valid reasons for not liking, as soon as in the Backwards episode, she says, will you be my best friend? She's like, all right. She's so excited. So much to explore with that. But thank you, Greg. That was a great comment. But Greg's not done. He says, the funniest thing to me in the whole episode is when Elaine is talking about seeing JFK Jr. on a bus and she says, I hit the ding. Nobody knows what that thing is called. It is such a cute moment. And lastly, Greg says, all in all, I'm not a fan of this episode. It feels very hacky and almost more like a bad 80s sitcom. Too much overacting and not enough comedy. We could have had more about the shower and George's revenge and cut out all the cable guy stuff and the plane scene. They just needed something for Jerry and Kramer to do when this could have just been a George and Elaine episode. Once again, Greg, you have read my mind. I have a lot to say about everything you've just mentioned, so I'm going to save that for my final thoughts on the episode. But no surprise, I'm completely on the same page. Thanks again, Greg. You always have great thoughts. If you would like to become a contributor on Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Benes podcast, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. You will get all the information needed, and you can send in thoughts, send me an audio clip, you can send an email, however you would like to send them, and your thoughts could be on a future episode. Moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. I love the moment with Leslie as she's leaving the party. I mean, the moment she comes from Jerry's bedroom to leave, you can feel the wave of panic that comes over Elaine. And then in her voice, I just love that performance. Definitely something new for JLD to play with. And so great. And just like Greg, I do love that last scene. She's so dejected when she tells that JFK Jr. story. It's super fun. My final notes on this episode, it's a so-so episode. It's decent for Elaine, and I guess in the sense that she does have an entire plot that we see. Such low expectations in these early episodes. But I am not crazy about the whole cable thing. I think they just needed something for Kramer to do that would coincide with the other plots. Everything had to converge in Jerry's apartment like Larry Charles talked about. And that dream sequence I felt was so overdone and unnecessary. Larry Charles was really actually proud when he's in, I think it was in the Inside Look or in the commentary. He was very proud of the ambition of that scene and how innovative it was for a sitcom at that time, kind of killing the main character in a dream sequence. But it was way too long. And to quote Simon Cowell from Idol, a bit self-indulgent. And this lengthy scene, it could have been easily swapped out for more Elaine-Leslie interaction. I was craving more of that, more of Elaine groveling to Leslie, Leslie insulting Elaine. Hey, maybe even Elaine having a moment standing up for herself. These are two very talented actresses who deserved, more screen time together, in my opinion. More of intimidated Elaine and less gross cable guys. That's all I'm saying. I feel like this is going to become like a regular segment on this show. Like, what could they have swapped out so that Elaine could have gotten a much better storyline or a much, more substantive part of the episode? The Benes barter or the stock swap. I don't know. Anyway, that I just find myself saying, gosh, they really could have just not shown this whole chunk of it so that we could have gotten a lot of Elaine. Even though the main plot that the episode is named after is driven by Elaine and her relationship with Leslie, yeah, there really isn't a ton for JLD in this episode. Besides, it's really just in between dialogue, between George's rants and the antics of Kramer and his cable guys. As I said, I loved her nervous and desperate for approval performance. I mean, rarely is JLD's performance an issue. It's never the issue. It's more so, at this point in the series, too little of her performance to enjoy. Oh, wait, this isn't a podcast. No, this is a podcast about Elaine Bennis's contribution to Seinfeld. Never mind. And I have to mention, this is another episode, yet another one, where Jason Alexander shines brighter than everyone else. I mean, it's a very George episode. And no surprise, Jason Alexander he performs it to perfection. He's beyond entertaining. I could watch a George rant all day. And I think that's all I can say about the baby shower. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.